Now, what on earth is the doctrine of affections? Most of you have never heard of that before. It's in some sort of kinky BDSM cult. It's in some grimoire from some magic society. Translations for the noise orifice, yes. Well, see, let's take a look back in time. We can go like Cher, if I could turn back Tom. And let's take a look at the Age of Enlightenment, which is the period of political and cultural history in the West that takes place in the late 17th and mid 18th centuries. This is the point at which society is moving away from a society dictated by the spiritual and practical life of the church. Individuals began to assert their ability to form their own opinions based on what they would consider undogmatic thinking, scientific thinking, many of the foundations of which were laid in the Renaissance. And so, think about it. This is a bit of a new world for a lot of people, because after the fall of Rome, you had close to 1,000 years, 500 years, 1,000 years of just what we call the Dark Ages. No significant scientific progress, mostly just slow. But now you had a society that was absolutely enchanted with the notion, the concept that they could potentially explain everything through a scientific theory. And so they started trying to form outside of the realms of science. They tried to come up with theories about what makes good literature, what makes good art. And of course, composers tried to make rules about what made good music, but most importantly, how that music could arouse the senses and could arouse the affections, which they didn't see it as just emotions, but they saw them as disturbances in the balance of a being caused by excesses. And so you had composers who had started to delve into theories of what made this music great, how to express this and that. And they were surrounded by a society that sought to find rationalistic explanations for the world around them. And so the Baroque period was born, when you had expressions that were heightened. So you had elegance, but also extreme ornamentation that showed the intellectual type in the approach to art. So they were surrounded, these songs would be played in palaces surrounded by hedge mazes and gardens that were geometrically assigned, the notion of organizing nature. And the palaces themselves were very, very elaborate. And in the palaces, you had small orchestras performing music that sounded like this.
mio,
Practice, just like how you get to Carnegie Hall, right? So, some of you have been paying attention to some of the stuff that I have been singing, and you'll notice that the music that I'm singing here is a little bit different than what I usually do. And, well, there's reasons for that. Like I said, we are in the Baroque period, and in the Baroque period, what was valuable was ornamentation, the intellectual part of things. However, it wasn't cold or intellect. There was no notion that it should be divorced from any emotion. In fact, the argument of the doctrine of affections was that it was possible through a perfectly rational mean to arouse the emotions in the human spirit. So the doctrine of affections, or also known as the doctrine of affections and temperament, was rooted in finding the scientific reason to explain our emotional and visceral reactions to sound and music. And this in itself was nothing more than the revival of the ideas of antiquity. During my first What on Earth is Opera, I told you that the origins of opera go back to the 15th century, when during the Renaissance, where the Camerata Fiorentina, the Florentine chamber, which was a group of intellectuals in the Renaissance, were desperate to try to revive the notion of ancient Greek theater. And many of these luminaries who could read the ancient Greek texts that survived would observe that most of the Greek plays included sung portions by choirs. And so they tried to reconstruct what that sounded like. And that informed a great deal of the music of the Renaissance. It is very, very, douce dame jolie, que tiens ton besie, que tienne signorie, que peu de sang printemps. And so opera started from what they called the drama per musica, drama through music, where you had plays that had musical interludes, where a choir or chorus would sing about what was going on, just like the Greek chorus in a Greek play would comment on what was going on. And, then everything took a very, very strange left turn, and the musical section started taking over everything else, and before you know it, you had opera. But the opera of the Renaissance, the late Renaissance, like Claudio Monteverdi, still had these very beautiful but very, very simple but elegant melodies. So you had Pure ti miro, pure ti godo, pure ti miro, pure ti godo. But now that we come into the Baroque period, we have ornamentation. We have people wanting to show off the powers of the human mind to be able to create beautiful things through astonishing geometry and astonishing ornamentation. So now you have things like no sé, per rendermi beato parto verso se sele, e poi pupille belle, a voi ritornerò. And you will notice, when you listen to the instruments, for example, the violins, the way that the violins play, they weren't violins back then. They were viola da gamba, viola da braccio, etc. They were the great-great-grandparents of the modern violins. They're not played with the smooth, but bam, bam, ba, bam, ba, 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 bam, ba, bam, that is typical of what the Baroque strings sound like. And the human voice started imitating what the Baroque instruments were doing. That is why you don't sing like ombra fedele anch'io, like you would in a romanticist opera, but ombra fedele anch'io. So you can, it's almost as if the voice itself has that strike from the bow. That is part of the Baroque style. The voice becomes one more instrument in the Baroque period. Even though in many cases it becomes the star instrument, it is still considered one part of the incredibly complex machinery that is polyphony, which is multiple melodies going off at the same time. So that doctrine of affections, they started looking at things, at elements of things that both in the body and the music, trying to find out what the relationship was between certain musical intervals. And an interval in music is nothing more than the distance between one note and another. So they kept positing that certain keys, certain intervals, had certain innate qualities that allowed people to experience things. So for example, they would say that sorrow, they would say, for example, whereas if one knows that sadness is a contraction of these subtle parts of our body, then it is easy to see that the small and the smallest intervals are the most suitable for this passion. Interesting, right? Well, what does that mean? Yes, that sounds nice, but what does it mean? Small intervals. So, small intervals, they would say, such as, lascia io pianga. I'm not moving very far. La cruda sorte. It's all very, oh no, I'm so sad. So all of these small intervals would create this image of this introspective, sad moment. So that sets the scene. That immediately causes you to go, oh, she is sad. And then they say, for example, you have sadness, which is different from despair. Despair is a much more violent display of sadness. So larger intervals, larger leaps can show despair. So what happens when you combine those small intervals and those larger intervals? Well, I'm going to show you. This is the aria Lascia ch'io pianga la cruda sorte. Let me weep my bitter fate, from the opera Rinaldo by George Friedrich Händel. And in this you have Armida. She has been locked in a tower and she is weeping for her lost freedom. And in those small intervals, you can hear the quiet crying. But then she goes, "E che sospiri, e che sospiri." Then the moments where a strangled sob leaves her throat. But then she goes back to sadness because the shape of the melody drags her downwards. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the theory put into practice with Lascia ch'io pianga.
Lascia ch'io pianga la cruda sorte e che sospiri la libertà e che sospiri la libertà. Lascia ch'io pianga la cruda sorte e che sospiri la libertà. Il duolo infranga desteri stare dei miei martiri sol per pietà dei miei martiri sol per pietà. Lascia ch'io pianga la cruda sorte e che sospiri la libertà. Sospiri, e che sospiri la libertà. Lascia ch'io pianga la cruda sorte e che sospiri la libertà.
So, I think that aria does show quite a bit of how that theory was being put into practice. Of course, Georg Friedrich Händel was one of the most successful opera composers of the Baroque period. Born in Germany, he moved to England, where he became a naturalized citizen, and he wrote in the Italian style, so German, British, Italian. A good chunk of his operas were written in Italian, and something funny. One of the things I love about Handel is that he was kind of the first merch maven of opera. His operas became so popular that he would have little pewter figurines of his opera characters designed and poured. So, and they would be sold in the lobbies of the opera houses. So you could take home your favorite operatic character with you, which kind of shows you that Mattel was not revolutionizing anything. In fact, it's kind of funny. You can search and you can find still some of these figurines existing and in museums. I think a few of them are at La Scala in Milan, which is just kind of funny when you look at it. It's, nowadays we think everything is so over commercialized. We go to a Lady Gaga concert and we walk out and there's like her new CD, sweatshirt, etc. No, Handel was the one. This is who began it all. And he was a fanboy's gonna fanboy. Malachi. So the doctrine of the affections in the eyes of many composers had to prove itself a systematic. More than that, I think you own like 90% of your wardrobe at some point was wrestling merchandise. But so the doctrine of the affections had to prove itself in the eyes of other composers to be a true systematic theory, a specific and concrete instruction for the use of notes, intervals, tonal centers, rhythm, and all other standards of music composition in order to create affection. The desires to ask the questions and to replicate results kind of show you the mindset of the era of the Enlightenment. The doctrine for them had to prove scientifically that the features of instrumental music could on their own produce affections in listeners just as much as vocal music could. These composers recognized physics as a confirmation of the effects observed, and they believed it should not be used as a starting point for composition, which is funny because when you look at how they organized chords, they had to go back to the Pythagorean theorem that divided the chords into triads, which triad is, of course, the when you sit down on the piano and you play, you start from middle C, and you play every other note on threes, that is a chord. Dum, bum, bum. And that is what we consider chords nowadays. Back in the Renaissance, they called them hexachords. It was a completely different thing. Oh my God. I won't even get into the complicated stuff that was the Renaissance, because I did one of my master's theses on analyzing a mass by Josquin des Prés called L'Homme Armé, and I did not know what I was getting into, because the majority of music theory as we know it now was vastly different there. And let's put it this way, I suffered a lot. But so now that we've heard sadness, how, for example, would the Baroque composers, looking at the doctrine of affections, how would they express hope or optimism? Now, here is a quote from Johann Mattheson, who was one of the first theory writers to take on the definition of each emotion. Big task, if you ask me, but hope is an elevation of the soul or spirit. Despair is a depression of this, all of which are things which can be very naturally represented with sound, especially when the other circumstances contribute their part. Hope can be described by ever-rising figures and lofty, floating sounds. Okay, let's test that, shall we? I'm going to sing a song, an aria from the opera Polifemo, which is by a composer by the name of Porpora. Now, this man was kind of like the superstar of opera in the Baroque period as well. Thank you, Xeloy. X. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Xeloy? That's gonna bother me. Okay. Malachi, find out how to pronounce that name. Where was I? So this is from the opera Polifemo. Polifemo is the name of a cyclops. So why is an opera named after a cyclops? Okay, a lot of operas in the Baroque period are based around Greek myth or fantastical events. Like Rinaldo has a sorcerer in it. Operas and there is, of course, Purcell's very famous The Fairy Queen, which is full of fairies. I love that opera. In any case, I'm not going to get super excited about that yet, but in any case. So, those of you who read the Odyssey might remember that name. For those of you who did not, I will lay it for you. So we have Odysseus, or Ulysses, who has spent a lot of time hinkle-pinkling about, traveling, oftentimes by his own damn fault, for being too clever. And now he has been captured by the Cyclops Polyphemus. And the Cyclops is not a good neighbor. State Farm is not there. And what he does is every day he decides to eat one of Odysseus's sailors. Rude, am I right? So rude. And he didn't even share. And so up until the point where Odysseus realizes that he's going to be the last one on the platter. Now at this point, the Cyclops, being a Cyclops, is not a terribly social person, and he doesn't quite entertain people for tea very often, so he asks Odysseus what his name is. And Odysseus, he probably didn't even wash his hands though. Odysseus tells him that his name is Nobody. Okay. Why on earth would he do that? Well, you see, when Odysseus realized that his number was up and he needed to do something, he decided to grab a burning log from the Cyclops' fire while the Cyclops was asleep, and he essentially just burns the Cyclops' eye when he is asleep, allowing him to escape. Now, of course, the ruckus the Cyclops makes brings every Cyclops in the island to attend to their brother, who is screaming, "Holy hell!" And they ask him, brother, what is wrong? Who has done this to you? And you know how this goes. Of course, Polyphemus goes, "Nobody has blinded me. Nobody has hurt me. Nobody has done this to me." At which, of course, his brother Cyclops go, "Well, he's totally lost it and hurt himself." And being Cyclops, a creature not terribly known for its empathy, they walk away and they leave him alone. And Odysseus goes on his merry way to cause more mayhem across the Mediterranean Sea before he is done. But in this opera, we have Polyphemus, after he has been blinded. Now, Polyphemus is exceptionally ugly, we are told in the opera. But Porpora gives him some of the most gorgeous music to sing, probably to create that level of contrast. And at this point, Zeus, who is his father, because of course Zeus is his father. If you meet anyone in ancient Greece, you have an 80% chance of guessing correctly that they are an offspring of Zeus. Zeus feels absolutely terrible about his child getting blinded, and so he decides to give him immortality. And so Polyphemo sings this beautiful, beautiful aria called Alto Jove, O Most High Zeus, where he thanks his father for the gift of immortal life. And it begins with this very, very gentle Alto Jove. It's him saying Jove, or in this case, Zeus's name. And the way he says it, it's almost like the voice itself is bowing to Zeus, is making a reverence. But then, what happens as he describes the gratefulness for Zeus' generosity is that the voice begins to rise and fall again and rise in constant waves of hope. And so we have optimism. Remember how I talked about sorrow and despair? Well, I want to show you for the last Italian selection of the night, because then I'm going to show you some things that I've made. I want to sing one of my favorite arias, Parto, from Germanico in Germania, by Porpora. Porpora wrote beautiful music. He had these languid passages that I think you will, if you listen to just those strings, just it's like chocolate. But here we have a character who is taking his leave of his beloved to go on a dangerous journey. And he talks about how the distance and the distance from his beloved is going to make the torments of possible death even more unbearable. And the composer begins with a breathless parto, as if the character is, of course, struggling to catch their breath because they are caught by a powerful emotion. Take a note here. In the Baroque period, silence is used very effectively. You don't see that in the classical period. A silence in a classical period did not happen. You will not find a dead stop in the middle of any piece until the Romanticism happens. So in the Baroque period, they kind of realized that silence in and of itself, even in an instrumental line or a vocal line, while there's music playing underneath, means something just as much as when the character is speaking, or in this case, of course, singing. So here we have sorrow that moves into full despair, that can are represented by these downward spirals. And when he starts talking about the torments of death, it is this one moment of absolute explosion before he goes back in, the most dramatic moment you can find. So here we go. Parto, ti lascio. I leave and take my leave of you. From Germanico in Germania.
Parto, ti lascio, ti lascio farà, ma nel partire io sento troppo crudele tormento. Non sarà tanto amara, non sarà tanto amara la pena del mio tanto la pena del mio morir. del morir.
And so, that concludes the expository section of the Doctrine of Affections. Thank you, Lady Q. So, I had an experiment I wanted to run. See, I have made some arrangements of some known melodies, and I wanted to kind of test the Doctrine of Affections to see with you. Yes. Sometimes I need to remember to set my stages so people don't accidentally jump on them. But hey, you know, if anyone wants to come up here and sit around. So, without further ado, let me show you a couple of things, and let me sing for you some arrangements I've made in the Baroque style of some melodies you might recognize. And you tell me whether you think they fit the Doctrine of Affections or not. Let's start with someone very well known. I won't even tell you what it is because you'll know it. So here we go.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mommy is yelling no, but her daddy has told her to go. And her friends are nowhere to be seen, so she walks in a frozen dream to the screen with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a saddening bore, 'cause she's looked at 10 times or more. She can spit in the eyes of fools as they asked her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the lawman beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know. He's in the best-selling show. Is the life on Mars? It's in America's tortured brow that Mickey Mouse has turned up a cow, and the workers have struck for fame, 'cause landing's on sale again. See the mites and their million hordes, from Ibiza to the Northwood Broads. Rule Britannia is out of bounds. To my mother, my dog, and clowns. But the film is a saddening bore, 'cause I wrote it 10 times or more. It's about to be read again, as I ask you to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the lawman beating on the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know. He's in the best-selling show. is alive on Mars.
It fits rather well, I think. So, let's take a look at one of the songs that I thought could potentially show that grief. Remember the Lascia che pianga, very small intervals? Well, I know a song that begins with a section just similar to that, to talk about dejection and sadness, and then moves into floating, powerful, wide intervals to describe sorrow. And, well, I want you to tell me what you think.
When you were here before, could look you in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. You float like a feather in a beautiful world. I wish I was special. You're so fucking special. But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. Want a perfect body. Want a perfect soul. I want you to notice when I'm not around. You're so fucking special. I wish I was special. But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. He's running out again. He's running out. He's running out, running out, running out, running out again. Whatever makes you happy, whatever you want, You're so fucking special. I wish I was special, but
so let's move this beat up a little bit. How about a cheerful something in the Baroque style? I spent a while making these arrangements, so I hope you enjoy them. In any case, here is something, a little experiment. I hope you'll forgive.
Bad romance, ra 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 ra, rama ma ga ga, ooh la la. Want your bad romance? I want your ugly, I want your disease. I want your everything as long as it's free. I want your love, 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 love. I want your love. I want your drama, the touch of your hand. I want your leather-studded kiss in the sand. I want your love, 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 love. I want your love.
Thou knowest that I want thee, and thou knowest that I need thee. I want it bad, thy bad romance.
I want your love, I want your revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. I want your love and your lover's revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. I want your love, and I want your revenge. I want your love, I don't wanna be friends. Je vais ton amour, et je vais ta revanche. Je vais ton amour, I don't wanna be friends. No, I don't wanna be friends. I don't wanna be friends. Want your bad romance. Want your bad romance. I want your loving. I want your revenge. You and me could have a bad romance. I want your love and your lover's revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. Caught in a bad romance. La la, want your bad romance.
These are fun. I hope you're having fun. So now I have time for one last song. So I thought, well, I started Baroque, and then I went into modern in the Baroque style. So I thought it would be a great idea to sing a rock song that was written to sound like a Baroque song. Did you know this? So, Procol Harum, a wider shade of pale. Procol Harum is a progressive rock band, and A Wider Shade of Pale is one of the most enduring songs in the prog rock repertoire. And you know that the composer composed it to kind of emulate a chorale by Johann Sebastian Bach. Not imitate it, it is done in the style. So you hear that. If you ever listen to, for example, Johann Sebastian Bach's Orchestral Suite Number 14, I think it is, which has the air on a G string. that is what the composer of A Wider Shade of Pale was going for. So I thought, why not take that prog rock song and just give it the full Baroque treatment? So to say goodnight to all of you, and I want to thank Mud and Bespoke for having me here. Please support this wonderful shop. If you look, I am wearing one of their heads. I am wearing the ocelot head. I modded it, so all of the textures there are mine. So I have a unique Cheshire look, but their heads are amazing. So after this concert, go thee downstairs and pick up a head and buy it. So without further ado, here we've got Wider Shade of Pale.
We see the light fandango, tune some cartwheels across the floor. I was feeling kind of seasick when the crowd asked for more. The room was humming harder, and the ceiling flew away. When I called out for another drink, the waiter bought a tray, and so it was later when the miller told his tale. And her face at first just ghostly, then the wider shade of pale. She said there is no reason, and the truth is plain to see, that I wandered through my playing cards and could not let her be, no. One of 16 Vestal virgins who was leaving for the coast. And although my eyes were open wide, they might have just well have been closed. And so it was later when the miller told his tale. He said that her face, at first just ghostly, turned a wider shade of pale. The miller told his tale. Said on her face at first just ghostly, in the wider shade of pale, a wider shade of pale.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to Mud for hosting me here. And oh, give me 1 second. I accidentally turned my thing off. Okay.